Hey guys, this video covers array lists. So array lists are a lot like arrays. Here are the methods that we're going to cover in this video. We have dot size. You can read what they do, but we have dot size, dot get, dot set, dot add. There are two versions of dot add. We'll talk about both. There is dot remove. We have dot contains and dot index of. And there are other methods that are used for array lists. We will cover those as we need to. But right now, the meat of what we need for array list, they're right here. And there are two different ways to declare an array list. We'll see those inside the main method. And of course, because we're just doing our stuff in the main method, we can always write methods that take array list as parameters, or we can write methods that return array list, and they can return int, strings, whatever we want to do with an array list, just like we've done before. So to get started, to use an array list, we have to use either import java.util.ArrayList. We could use import java.util and we can use an asterisk instead. You can do java.util.asterisk, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to refer specifically to the array list. And so when you create an array list, there are two ways you can do this. It sounds crazy, but your array list either contains objects of the same type or it does not. In the case that your array list contains objects that are all of the same type, for instance, integer, string, I put Boolean, and later on when we start writing our own classes and objects that are created by those classes, an array list is capable of holding all of those objects that are created. Like we're going to create I don't know. I think the common thing is to like create a dog class or whatever. We could have an array list that stored all the types of dogs that we wanted, or students, or something like that. And so, in the case that you have an array list that has objects that are all of the same type, your syntax has to be capital array, capital list, and in pointy brackets, you have the type, and it equals new array list of whatever type. You don't have to put anything in the rounded brackets or parentheses. Uh, if you have an array list that contains objects of various types, you can just do array list, name of list equals new array list. Up here, I actually need to put name of list as well. We get an error otherwise. So what we're going to do is first work with the array list that we are going to commonly see, and that's going to be the ones that are of the same type. So let's see. If we wanted to make an array list of names, so we'll do array list, and it's going to be string, and we want to call this, I don't know, call it names equals new array list. So right now we've created a new array list. The name of this array list is names, and if we go back up and look at the methods that we have, the first one I want to talk about is the dot size. So dot size is going to return the size of the array. And in this case, right now, if we did dot size, we're going to put names dot size, and we expect to get 0 because there's nothing in the array. So when we run this, what's it going to run? I'm not on console, that's why. So we get 0. So if we want to add things to the array, the first thing that we need to do is refer back to the array. So we're going to have names dot add, and now we're going to put, it says an array list of strings. So let's see if we try to add like 4. We're going to get an error because it's going to tell us that this is not is not a string. So to do, like, obviously to get around the error, you need, what in the world? Get out of here. So to get around the error, you just put in I don't know, a name, and we'll call it Tom. And so now the error goes away, and we can just do names dot add Zuckerberg, sure. Is it Zuckerberg? Let's go with that one. And we'll do names.add Colgan. And if the easy part about printing an array list is you can just do system.out.print and the name of the array list, and when you run it, it gives us Tom, Zuckerberg, and Colgan. So right now we have 3 things in our array list. Now, say we want to change one of the values without adding anything to the array list, then we can do names.set, and say we wanted to change Tom to Mark. So we need to set the index for Tom is 0, so we're going to do set the value at the 0 position to Mark. And when we come back and update this, we're going to take this out. We're going to keep our print statement at the bottom so we can actually believe that this stuff is happening. So now we have Mark, Zuckerberg, and Colgan, even though we initially declared when we did names.add for Tom, we updated it to be Mark. Let's see now, say we wanted to add a value into the array at some position that was not at the end. Again, if we go back to the top of our class, there are 2 .add methods. If you just do .add and one parameter, that value will be inserted at the end of the array. But if you do .add an index and a new value, it's going to insert that new value wherever you tell it to be inserted, as long as that's between 0 and the size of the array. So if we add names.add at position 2, we're going to add Rebecca. And we run this now, what's going to happen is, so right now we have 0, 1, 2. You know what? Actually make that 1 instead. So what's going to happen is we're going to have Mark. Rebecca is going to be inserted in front of Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg is going to go back to position 2, and Colgan is going to go back to position 3. Because when you insert a value into an array list, everything to the right of the point of insertion, those index values increase by 1. So when we run this now, we get Mark, Rebecca, Zuckerberg, and Colgan. So just like we add stuff to an array list, we can also delete values from an array list. So for strings, there are a couple of ways to do this. We can do names.remove. And so if I wanted to remove Zuckerberg, I could refer to the position of Zuckerberg, which is 2. And that's going to give I didn't print the array list, all right? So it removes Zuckerberg. Now, the other way you can do this with a string is you can refer to the name specifically, and I can say it's case sensitive and all that stuff, Zuckerberg. And when we run this, we still get the same thing. Now, this doesn't work for ints because I actually don't know why, but it just doesn't work if you have an array list of ints. If you try to remove that integer value, it's going to search for the index. I mean, it's because it's searching for the index, but I don't know how you convert that index to an integer object for it to search for. It's not terribly important. So we have this array list of strings, and everything that we can do with an array list of strings, we could do with an array list of ints and all this other stuff. So let's see, we've done, did we do get? No, we did not. So names.get, let's see, 3. So right now this names.get3 is a reference to something in the array list, but we are doing nothing with it. So we need to either say string name string girl equals names.get3, and that's going to we're going to say Rebecca, we're going to do 1 instead. And so now if we did system.out.print, we could do girl, and it's going to say Rebecca. We can also directly reference this instead. We can do names.get1, and it's going to give us the same thing. So anytime you have a method that refers to something, you don't have to store that reference in a variable. You can access it directly without first storing it into a variable. Let's see, if we came along and we wanted to, I don't know, do index of, let's make a new array list. Let's take all this out. So we're going to say array list, and this time it's going to store integers. Now, integer for array list has to be capitalized. It has to be a capital I, and it has to be the entire word integer, not int. Like we're used to saying int x equals whatever. For an array list, it has to be the entire word integer, and it has to be capitalized. So array integer, we're going to say squares equals new array list. So let's say we wanted to put in the first 10 perfect squares. So we can do for n I equals 1, I is less than or equal to 10, I plus plus. And we're going to do squares dot add I times I. So we are going to add all of the perfect squares from 1 to 10 to this, and then we're going to print the array list. So we get 1, 4, 9, whatever. So say we wanted to check if, I don't know, say you think 56 is a perfect square. So we're going to do squares that contains 56. When we run this, we're going to get false because 56 is a perfect square and it's not in our array list, which we can see. But if we came and changed this to 64, then it's going to give us true because 64 is in that array list. Another thing so actually that covers array lists when the objects are of the same type. We've done, did we do index of, index of 100. So if we refer to, if we print squares.index of 100, we are going to get 9 because it's 0 index, so we go from 0 to 9. Now the thing to note is if we did squares.remove, actually I wonder if this works. I don't know. So let's see, 81. I think we're going to get an error because it's going to say there's nothing at position 81, but we'll find out. Yeah. So what I was saying earlier is that the index is 81 and the size is 10. So this is searching for an index of 81. I wonder if we put this in quotes, will it take it out? Let's find out. Let's see. I was gonna say it's not used, right? Yeah. Unlikely argument type string for remove. Yeah. For a collection of integers. Yeah, it's not gonna do that. So if we wanted to remove 100, not 100, let's say 36. And so squares dot index of 100. And here we're gonna do the same thing, dot index of 100. So the first time we see squares.index of 100, that value is going to be 9 because the array contains 10 values and 100 is at the end of the array. When we remove 36, everything to the right is going to get shifted 1 down, and so then we expect the index of 100 to be 8 instead. Let's see what we get. You know what? Let's do after removing 36, the index of 100 is Squares dot index 100. Whoa, what did I do this time? Squares that remove 36. Why is 36 not in there? That should oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, duh. If we're gonna remove 36, 36 is going to be the sixth value in the array. So we need to remove the sixth position. Duh. So after removing 36, the index of 100 is 8. I guess I can make that look better. So when we remove a particular value from the array list, everything to its right is shifted down one. And likewise, if we add, I don't know, let's see, 6.5. So in position 6, let's add 42.25. And then, so what we expect, is an array. It's an array list of integers, so we can't do that. So if we in the sixth position add 42, then now we expect the index of 100 to be 10. So when we add 1, everything to the right has its index value increased by 1. So the last thing is, what if you have an array list of objects that aren't all the same? If you're familiar with Python, you know that when you make a list in Python, it can just store whatever it wants. You can have Boolean, just anything that you want. Array lists are a Java's way of doing that. So if we make an array list, we'll call this things, and it's going to equal still new array list. We don't even need the open. All right. So let's see. We're gonna add a bunch of different things. So we're gonna do things that add, and we're gonna put in a Boolean value, false. Then we're gonna add things that add. We're gonna put in an integer, 4. We're gonna do things that add. We're gonna put in a string. I am a string. And what else can we do? Things that add, we can put in a char. Let's put in x as a char. And let's see, so we got Boolean, int, string, char, things that add. We can put in, what am I missing? A double. So we'll do pi 3.1415. And so if we print this things, then we get we still get we get our print statement returns an array that contains each of the things that we put in. But now there's some things that happen with an array list of things that are not of the same type that don't happen when we have an array list of things that are of the same type. So for a moment, let's do array list. Make this an integer. I want to show you something. Integer, we're going to say integers equals new array list integer. And we're going to say integer add 1 and integer dot add 2. This needs to be integers. So all right, so we're gonna check 4 has an index value of 1. So if we try to do things that get to access the value of 4, things that get 1 plus integers dot get 0. So what we are trying to tell Java to do is add 4 and 1 to get 5. The problem is that in an array list of things that are not of the same type, the 1 is considered an integer object, not an integer itself. So when you have an array list of things that are not of the same type, if you want to access the primitive type of that variable, you need to first cast it as whatever you want. And so int, we still need, we'll call this int temp equals. So now again, like, just so you can see that if we take out this cast, it's going to give us an error, and it's going to say it can't add some integer object to an integer. And that's exactly what we get. Some object is trying to add to an integer, which is not possible because this is a reference to an integer, not an integer itself. So to make it an integer, we again cast it as an int, and so now we can use it. And it would be the same thing if we try to do something with the char. I think strings are tough to mess with, so strings would probably work out fine. Anyway, so now if we instead, let's not store this, let's just print it. What nonsense. So when we run this, we're going to get 5 because 1 plus 4 equals 5. But again, if you have an array list of things that are not all of the same type, to refer to the primitive variable, strings, booleans, ints, so forth, you have to cast that thing as that data type first in order to use it. And just to be on the safe side, casting never hurts. Even if it's redundant, it won't make a difference. So that concludes this video over ArrayList. We've covered all these methods. We have .size, .get index, .get, .set, .add, .remove, .contains, and .index of. I guess one more thing is to show you that we can actually make a method that returns an array list. We can have static, and so then we're going to have array list static. How are we going to do this? Array list integer. I don't know, num. And what's it going to tell us? So it's telling us right now that it has to return an array list. So we're going to say, you know what? Let's take in a parameter of int 8. Int, not 8, but I don't know, just num. So, well, stupid me use num for the name too, so I'll call it 10. I don't care. So we need to still return an array list, right? So say we make an array list. So array list is going to be an integer. So let's call this values equals new array list. So for int I equals 0, I is less than n, we'll say less than or equal to n, I increases by 1, and we're going to do values dot add I times n. So we're just returning the, actually, we'll say to 12. And n should be temp. I'm sorry. It should be temp. And so then we're going to, at the end of this, return values. And so now we have a method that returns an array list. In our main method, if we take out all this nonsense, I can't remember what we call that method. we're gonna say, can I see it? This array list. So let's see. We're gonna say array list integer. We're gonna call this multiple. We'll just call it mul for short. Equals num 8. And we're gonna do system.out.print, and we're gonna print mul. So what we've done is created a method that prints the first, it's going to do 13. So now the first 12 multiples of 8. So we expect this to start at 1 and end at 96. Let's see what happens. So yeah, we get 8, 16, 24, all the way up to 96. So again, just like any method can return anything, now that we know ArrayList, we can have a method that returns an ArrayList. Now, the syntax for this stuff is not confusing, but it's a lot of brackets and parentheses sometimes when we're typing and stuff. So just keep track of that stuff. So for a method to return an ArrayList, it's still going to be static, whatever you want it to return, name of the method. So static, in this case, we want an ArrayList of integers, name of the method, and then parameters. This could be blank, actually. And then we can just say, I don't know, you could make, I don't know, we could make this just print the perfect squares up to 12. Too many parentheses, right? So this method doesn't have to have a parameter. When we run it now, we're just gonna get, what did I get? The method num, because I have this dumb parameter here still. So now when we run this, we'll just get the perfect squares from 1 to 144. And so that's going to conclude this video over ArrayList. I'll see you guys in class. We'll do some practice, and later on we'll write some programs that use ArrayList over arrays so we can see how much more useful ArrayLists are.